With us this morning once more on a Friday morning, he's Bob Pollock. You can give Bob a call at 479-1160 or 349-WCCS if you have a question about lawns and gardens and such. Mr. Pollock, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us here today. This report from DEP yesterday, they've been looking at ticks. They've been ticky-tacking all around the state of Pennsylvania, including in Indiana County. And they're trying to find out just, we know that ticks bear certain illnesses, Lyme disease primarily, but there are others. And we know as well that Indiana County is one of the real hotbeds for it. And now I want to find out why. Tell me what you know about it. You know anything about this DEP study that's going on? Who's conducting it here in the county?
I actually don't.
No. But it's kind of interesting that they're looking now at tick nymphs, which are the little baby ticks, because you can't find them when they're on your skin. An adult tick is much easier to find than a young tick. And in the farm community and rural communities, anybody who's walking out outdoors in the summertime, by golly, they're susceptible, aren't they?
They are. As is anybody that's, hiking, walking, trails, anything like that has overgrowth or just grassy weeds and things along the side of a pathway are areas where, and grasses that are left to grow aren't necessarily mowed or maintained. So those places all become places where those ticks reside, and they'll hang up on the tip of a 3 or 4 foot tall stalk of grass or other weed, and they'll wait till somebody comes along and brushes by that, and then they
hitch a ride.
So it's as simple as that. I think the habitat that we have here is favorable for them. So we have a lot of, because we're a rural county, we have a lot of undeveloped areas where the grass and the weeds and everything just grow and are left there to grow naturally. And so then when we're out about and trekking through those areas, then that habitat is there. So those ticks are overwintering now, but they still can be active.
Yeah.
So when there's snow on the ground, that puts a layer over top of them. So it kind of protects us. It's a barrier between us and them, or our pets, or other wildlife. But when the snow's not there, then they can be active enough that we can come in contact with them.
Yeah,
and we know that in the fall, if you're out in the woods hunting, any hunter knows, boy, they got to be paying attention to that. November even into December, depending on the conditions.
And here comes fishing season.
And
People be tromping through the woods to get to their favorite spot on the stream.
Yep, and people are out walking on trails and paths, and some of those they make on their own property just to hike around. So those are all potential places where we can become exposed to those critters.
Yeah. Hey, we are in the middle of March now, literally the middle of March. It's the Ides today, March 15th. And so we begin to ask questions about things that we can do outdoors. And my question at this time of the year is, can I get out there and start hacking away at the grapevines? We had this little taste of spring this week. We're going to be back with highs in the 40s next week. Is it a little bit early yet, or can I go out and take the machete?
Yeah, Concord grapes are very hardy around here. So those ones you can start on sooner because you're probably not going to get any winter damage. I mean, we'd have to have kind of a severe event, a big ice storm or something like that would really cause some destruction once you did that pruning. But, of course, with grapes, you're supposed to prune those back pretty hard, probably a lot harder than we normally think, unless we're used to doing that or trained to do that. We'd kind of get a little tepid about, oh man, should I take this much off? Well, grapes are one of those that you can really prune back hard and need to encourage that new growth and maintain that vine. When they get really viney, if you have an arbor, for instance, or even a trellis structure, some support system that holds up those vines, the more that you leave on there, the more weight that is, the more dense it becomes, And then we run into issues with disease problems a lot of times because we leave it too thick. So you have last year's vines that put out growth plus new ones that come out, and then you get too dense of a canopy, which I guess is fine if all you're trying to do is have a shaded area, underneath that arbor. Yeah. But if you're trying to produce a crop of grapes, then whole different ballgame.
When trimming the grapes, and mine happened to be on an arbor, there's that big knuckle at the end of that stalk. Do I want to go back on the other side of that knuckle, or do I want to leave that knuckle intact? Because that's where the new growth comes from.
Yeah, so you kind of have that main trunk or stem or knuckle that's there, that's coming up from the ground. Mm-hmm. And then usually we let that go up a little bit up to that, wherever our maybe first wires are, or first part of that structure. Mm-hmm. And then we're trying to have some nodes or places where the branches come out, the vines in this case, and we usually can stub those back so that you've got a stub there, 3 or 4 stubs, and then from that, then the buds develop and put on your new growth. Now you can have a little bit more infrastructure than that on an arbor, because you have more territory to cover, versus just a vertical trellis system, where you just have 2 flat planes, so you don't need as much of that infrastructure or that basic part of the plant. You need a little bit more so that you can have coverage of that whole canopy structure that you're trying to cover up.
Put a roof over
So
it.
so you can have some longer vines and then trim them back so that you essentially have you've got certain vines going, maybe every 3 feet you've got them spaced so that when they vine out, then they're going to provide more coverage over top of that surface.
We're going out onto our lawns now, and we're seeing the winter damage, and there is some. One of the primary things about the winter damage that I'm noticing is mole activity in one section of the yard this year. The moles seem to have been really focused upon this one section, and it's all hilly and soft and got those hills. Can I just walk over those mole mounds and crush them back down?
Yeah.
I don't want to compact them, but I can.
No, you can level them out for sure.
Yeah.
Just take a rake and go over top of that and just compress it so that we get the soil so the tunnel's not there anymore. But just go over that and then level it up and go from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But there's if we can do leaf cleanup. The last couple of days, those leaves on top have really dried up. So if those have been blowing around and all the wind we've had over the winter months and blew the neighbor's leaves 5 doors down,
they're now yours.
They're now yours.
Gift of your neighbor to you. And
yours blew to the neighbor the next 5 doors down.
The guy at the end of the block is the guy that's really getting it.
That's right. That's right.
But those dry grasses and dry leaves, they're a brush fire risk, and we've seen a couple of brush fires cropping up here around Indiana County this week.
And really, so why don't we can manage that, right? If you feel that you need to burn them, it'd be much better to just put them in a pile and compost them. It's amazing how a big pile of dry leaves over time will disintegrate just about into really what we call black gold.
Yeah.
Not in this case, not coal.
Good stuff.
But compost. So that can really help you out over time if you just have a little area where you can push all those leaves to. That's something my father has done. He's got a yard full of tulip poplar trees, which have really large leaves. But every year, we just pile them up in a big, huge pile, and then they really, it looks 4, 5, 6 feet tall for a while, but then over the winter, it shrinks to half of that. Leave it go a little longer, and it's down to about a quarter of what it originally was.
Then you go turn it over,
and you turn it, and then you can turn it over, and boy, you bring up some nice stuff when you're all said and done.
Is it time right now to put that stuff on your garden?
Yeah, you can start doing that if you can get into it and it's decayed enough. You can get that on there. At least now, a couple caveats. it is nice to get a little bit of drying activity happening. So the last few days with the sun that we've had and a little bit of air moving, that's helped dry off the surface of the ground at least. If you coat that too much when the ground's still pretty wet and saturated, it's going to take a lot longer for that soil to dry up enough that you can start to work it. So it might be best to wait a little bit, and depending on whether you had already worked that soil last fall, that it's loose and rough right now, which allows it to dry out quicker, or if it's just a compacted surface, it might be best just to wait a little bit, get it dried out enough that you can do the initial working, then add the compost, and then mix that in. That might work a little better.
All right, there you go. Some things from Bob Pollock today as we begin to get outdoors, peek our heads out the door and say, can I really go out there? Yeah, you can.
Clean up sticks and
time to do
branches
that.
And check plants out. We've had a lot of freezing and thawing cycles, so you may notice that some plants, maybe that you planted last year, some perennials or things like that, maybe have heaved out of the ground because their root system wasn't as well developed in there. So you may need to touch those up and pop them out of the ground, replant them a little bit deeper, fix those up. Well, it's easy to do that now.
Yeah, good work to do. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
We appreciate your visit. It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, AM 1160 and 101.1 FM.